Phylum Cycliophora. So, this phylum is probably one of the most interesting phylums that I've had to do research on. Um, all right, so basically, in this presentation, we're just going to be introducing the phylum, talking about some of its characteristics and body parts, and the life cycles and sexual stages and all that. All right, so a little introduction to Phylum Cycliophora. This phylum was discovered in 1995 by Reinhard Christensen and Peter Funch. And these organisms were actually found on the mouthparts of Norway lobsters. Uh, these organisms are marine microscopic invertebrates, and they're very, very, very tiny. Currently, we have two distinct species that are representing this phylum. One of which would be the Symbion Pandora, which was found in 1995, and the other species for this phylum would be the Symbion americanus, which was found in 2006. There are several undescribed species that are known for this phylum, and usually they're only found in the Atlantic and Mediterranean lobsters. But throughout all the research and investigations done by not only me but all other marine biologists, there have been some leads that there might be a third species that might exist for this phylum. Now, in regards to the body structure and the characteristics of the cycliophorans, they have probably one of the most interesting bodies that I've seen for microscopic invertebrates. They are acoelomate, which means they have no body cavity, and they're also triploblastic. They're very, very, very tiny, like I mentioned earlier, 350 micrometers in length, and they're bilaterally symmetrical. Their bodies consist of three regions. The first region would be the anterior buccal funnel, which consists of the ciliated mouth ring. And then the second region would be the oval-shaped trunk. And the third region would be the posterior acellular stalk. Now, just going into a little bit of information about each region. The first region, like I mentioned, it has the ciliated mouth ring, which leads to the esophagus and the anus. The second region, which is the oval-shaped trunk, if you actually look closely, there's a U-shaped digestive tract right here. And the third region, which is the posterior acellular stalk, it has an adhesive disc, and that's what's used in order to attach on the lobster hosts on this for this organism. And like I mentioned earlier, there's a mouth right here, and that leads into the U-shaped gut, ending with the anus, and it opens outside the ciliated ring. The oval-shaped trunk in region two, with the adhesive disc, is covered in a layered cuticle, and the epidermis, which on this organism is actually surrounded by that cuticle. This organism has a well-developed nervous system and a brain, and it also has muscles, but they are not sheaths. Now, in the case of the life cycles and stages of this organism, it has one stage, which is the sessile feeding stage. And this is the most vital stage in the organism. It has two sexual life cycles, which would be the asexual and the sexual. And these life cycles consist of three types of larvae. For the asexual life cycle, it would be the Pandora larvae. And for the sexual life cycle, it would consist of the Prometheus and the chordoid larvae. Now, we do know, as we stated earlier, the cycliophorans do have a sessile feeding stage, which is the most prominent and vital stage. And in the sessile feeding stage, we do know that circulation and gas exchange occurs through diffusion, and we also do know that cycliophorans are commensal organisms, and that basically means commensal organisms basically means that the cycliophorans kind of develop some sort of a relationship with the organism they choose as a host. In this case, the lobsters, and they obtain food or some sort of benefit from the lobster without damaging or benefiting from it. And they are found living on the setae of the lobsters, and they filter feed on the on small food particles using their ciliated mouth ring. They do act as suspension feeders by essentially creating water currents using the dense cilia around their buccal funnel. Although they are commensal organisms, various studies have shown that there's a possibility that certain cycliophorans will be or can be parasitic, and they can be parasitic by essentially acting as an obstruction or clogging the lobster's setae. Now, we also did go over the fact that there's two life cycles in the cycliophorans. There's the asexual life cycle as well as the sexual life cycle. But before we get into that, I just wanted to mention that there's the three types of larvae, and we already stated that. But going over them one more time, the Pandora larvae is in the asexual life cycle, and the Pandora larvae is free swimming, and this larvae essentially increases the population density on the host. And in the sexual life cycles, we have the Prometheus larvae and the chordoid larvae. The Prometheus larvae is a male and is made by the feeding individual, and the chordoid larvae is the also in the sexual life cycle, and it is the best swimmer from all three larvae. And after liberation, it swims to a new lobster host, generating a new feeding individual. But I'll get more into that later. In the asexual life cycle, the Pandora larvae is generated inside the cycliophoran's brood chamber, and this occurs by internal breeding, which also the internal breeding also occurs in the oval trunk. Now, the Pandora larvae, after being generated, it then leaves and settles near the maternal individual until it is developed into a feeding individual. After developing into a feeding individual, it then forms it then moves on to the sexual life cycle. And the sexual life cycle does occur in the same place that the Pandora larvae is generated, which is the brood chamber. And the sexual life cycle releases a male stage, which is the Prometheus larvae, and a female. And the male is essentially released with a penis from the feeding individual. The female is also housed in the inside the feeding individual, and instead carries an oocyte. The male, after being released, or while being released, the male fertilizes the female as it's being released from the feeding individual, and then the female then migrates. While being fertilized, it migrates from the maternal individual to the lobster host, and then settles near the mouth parts of the host. This is where the female then insists, and this causes the embryo to form into the chordoid larvae. The chordoid larvae then hatches from the cyst and swims to a new lobster, um, which then forms a new feeding individual. And this process occurs on and on, and that's essentially the process. Now, these are just some questions to review the presentation. What are the three types of the larvae in the life cycles and stages of the cycliophorans? And how do cycliophorans reproduce? And the answer would be the Pandora, the Prometheus, and the Chordoid. And the only way cycliophorans can reproduce is sexually and asexually. And this is our works cited. And thank you so much for listening.